welcome to my cellar for the 275th time. And that's just the numbered ones. Now, I did a little quick math, not in my head, obviously. 270, we'll say they average 35 minutes, which might be a little low, but we'll say it does. That's 2,625 minutes, which breaks down to 160.4 hours. So if somebody were just to find this today and say, oh my goodness, I'm going to watch them all for, temporary fit of insanity or whatever would make them say that. 160 hours, let's see, in 24, 4, 7, 6, wow, I got to look at that one. 160 divided by 24. 6.66666 days. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Anyway, glad to be here. Anyway, we'll start right off with an interesting blast from the past. How were Mindflayers introduced into D&D? It seems like the craziest thing to be in the fantasy setting. I can see where you'd think that, but the Mindflayer was introduced in an edition of Strategic Gamer and Strategic Review. I edited it for a while, I believe, though we didn't discuss it specifically in these terms, I believe it was Gary's first foray into extraplanar or other dimensions, because the Mind Flayer was clearly not like anything in any kind of normal Northern European fantasy, because basically that's where it came from, was Northern European fantasy, with elements of the Arabian Nights and several other things. But they were so horrible, so outside the realm of comprehension that they were they were game busters, and we'll talk about that a little more in a couple of questions on further down. Well, actually, no, we're going to talk about it now. I know you've spoken about such in the past, but you were willing to recount the story of the introduction of psionics to the D&D. How did it come to be in the game? I'm fuzzy about the history of it and would love to hear from somebody who may know it best. No, I do know it best because I wrote it. As I said, the Mind Flayer came out in Strategic Review, and when I introduced one into the group that I was doing down at Carbondale, which were in effect, a playtest group, my objection was that it was not fair, in that in game mechanics, game terms, there was no recourse. The Mind Flayer just, that was it. There was also, I don't know, mind eaters or brain moles, or there's some other things that had this ability to just, basically suck the smarts right out of your head. And I told Gary it's not fair. It is not fair to have this thing in there that is a game buster, that any sadistic GM wants to screw up his campaign. All he's got to do is drop in a couple of Mind Flayers and turn all his players into mindless robots or automatons or zombies or whatever phraseology you'd like. And he says, okay, fine, do something about it. So I did. I went home over the next week or so, and I worked out the psionics charts and tables to be introduced into the game, which they were. Was that I don't remember even which one I wrote them for. I don't believe it was Blackmore. I think it was Eldritch Wizardry. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, as I wrote them, as we intended them, it was a tiny possibility that maybe someone in the campaign might have a budding, nascent psionic talent. So that now maybe Mindflayers and brain eaters and brain moles and all these things were no longer invincible. Well, as we came to learn, the gaming public does not understand the concept of infrequent. So everybody was rolling to see if they had psionics, and an astonishing number of people managed to make that tiny little roll. In any event, that's how psionics came about. They were supposed to be an extremely rare talent, a savant, an adept, somebody like that, who could then counteract the monsters that did those things. And even back then, we thought, that maybe they'd make a good NPC, somebody with psionics that could go with you and help you if you're going into an area where there's psionic stuff going on. I've been beat up roundly for that system. Doesn't bother me. It was so freakishly new to anybody that it was bound to catch some criticism. I still think the system holds up. It may have been written a little better, perhaps. Okay, I wasn't as good a writer then as I am now. I like to think anyway. And so maybe it could have been explained a little better. But the system does work, and it does take into account all the monsters that have psionic skills. And remember that Gary and I were both big fans of Doctor Strange. Mind power. Okay. Yeah, that GenCon theft story seems really damning for those two guys. I can only assume it was a crime of opportunity that they jumped on it rather than plan it out well. Yeah, well, they sure as hell didn't plan it out well. What kills me, they could have done the simplest thing. Wore a COVID mask. And people would have just assumed that you were conscious of being in a crowd, etc. And more than half your face would have been obscured. But no. So I got to figure it was a crime of opportunity. It certainly wasn't well thought out. It wasn't thought well. No, it's just stupid. And I do hope they catch them. And I do hope they're prosecuted for the value. I don't know, $300,000 retail. I don't think that's what they'll be prosecuted for. They'll probably be prosecuted for the cost, the material, the actual production costs of those cards. So, they say the face value is $300,000. Well, they'll probably be charged with $75,000 with $65,000 because of the profit margin and the markup. But anyway, I do hope they are apprehended, and because we cannot tolerate that kind of thing. No civilized society should tolerate theft. What do you think of the topic of memorizing the same spell more than once on one go in D&D? For example, light times 2. No. To me, it seems a bit like it goes against the premise of forgetting spells. Yes, that's it exactly. That is it. It goes against the premise of. And the whole premise of it's the Vancian magic system that is not really quite understood, but that if those syllables in that order are memorized, okay. Now, I once heard an interesting argument that why not do it if all they had to do was recite a trip word or something like that, and no. As a rule, no. That is why I have always been rather lenient, or rather munificent, in allowing artifacts that do common things repeatedly. Now, whether or not they have charges or whether they're permanently, the biggest dodge, the best dodge, is to cast permanent light on a crystal or something that you have mounted in the end of a staff. Now, as a wizard, that's a great tool. I don't care. Take a little crystal and do it and put it on a wand, or a wand-sized thing. The point being, you just put a leather bag over the top, like golf clubs, and the light's in there. It's on all the time. There were other minor, simple spells that easily lend themselves to a common use artifact. But for a mage to just go in and no, that you're right, it does violate. Let's see, what else? It does encourage players too much to use the same powerful generalistic spells on an adventure. But yes, I agree. It's a cop-out. It's a cop-out. And so in my world, brains don't work like that. They can't do it. I know this is a long one, so I'm going to bite it off in chunks. All right, thanks for taking time each week to... Okay. I'm good to know I'm enjoyed by both old and new players. I'd like to ask you to provide some general thoughts on source material production from the editorial perspective. Personally, I have never had as much interest in engaging with these games as a player as I do as a designer, writer, or game master. Well, I can comment to that too. I immediately became the game master, and I have a tiny fraction of hours under my belt as a player compared to what I do as a DM. And that was the dynamic in my group. I went to Lake Geneva, I learned the game, I got a copy, I went back. They became guinea pigs for me and Gary, and they knew it. They knew it pretty much. They knew I certainly was not coy about sharing the fact that I called Gary every now and again and we talked. So they knew I was in they knew they were under a microscope. And I don't look at books when a new book comes out. I don't look at books to see, how well did they do their margins? How often did they do a full page bleed? Do they have too many gutters between their columns? I don't do that. I limit my criticism to the writing and the art. And we'll go on now. That said, I do not have any interest in designing writing specifically for the games that are played within the new school. So I'll present my question in relation to the Twilight Fables book that you recommended recently, although it applies to much of what is being published these days. If a book is intended to be a resource in regular planning design, then when is there too much edge-to-edge, high-intensity, full-color artwork printed on semi-gloss paper? Hardly ever. And here's why I say that. Obviously, if there's more pages of full-color art than there are pages of printing, there's something going on. And I would look askance at it. But artwork is there both to identify, hi, this is our idea of an orc. But it's also there to inspire. So you don't just print a picture of an orc standing there drooling on himself, holding a spear. You show orcs engaged in something, whether it's combat or everyday mundane, whatever. But they're there to inspire and to kickstart. Okay, here's an orc, run with it. Here's the football, go, what are you going to do? So I I don't believe. Personally, I'm not a great fan of going to an art gallery or a museum for the art solely. Now, that said, I've been to the Louvre, I've been to Musée d'Orsay, I've been to, many other museums in the States, and I look at the art and I don't care what the thing says. I look at the stuff hanging on the wall and filter it through my perceptions, and it has the effect on me. I used to choose art for Dragon Magazine in the same vein. A picture of something that we're trying to describe that's never been seen, or something to help you get going. That's what art does. Art stimulates the imagination. It doesn't just fill in the blanks. It should stimulate the imagination. If that picture of the orc has overly large ears, well, perhaps it'll stimulate the viewer into thinking that the orcs hear very, very well, because they certainly have the apparatus for it. Or if they have, a big knobbly nose that, they sniff you out really well. It's what you take from that art that, whether you know it or not, helps you embellish what you present to your players. At least that's the way I see it, and that's my opinion. We'll go on here. I would like to acknowledge that Isgrim, I don't know how they pronounce it, Creations, does provide an RTF formatted document and also an electronic-only readability version that allows the backgrounds to be removed. That does give me the ability to reset the typefaces and layouts in my own desktop publishing software, at least for my own personal home use. Hey, if that's your hobby, that's fine. I know other people who have done similar projects, and cool. As long as long as you're not, stepping on the wizard's lollipop tree and you're not making any money at it, fine. I have copies of several books that will never ever be sold. They're just copies of something that someone did as a for their own edification, just something they set out to do, and so they did it. That's cool. But he still has to either juggle multiple resources or multiple devices, and even if he prints out his own hard copies, well, yeah, okay. When I was just a lad, if we carried around, well, we didn't use backpacks back then as such. It wasn't a big deal yet, though some of us vets had musette bags and that kind of stuff that we used. I used a surplus bag in college as a knapsack for my books. And a copy of Chainmail and the Three Little Brown Books. Oh, there was 2 pounds. And now you look at the first edition 3 hardbounds and the weight differential, and it gets even greater and greater. And I understand that they can be ponderous, but there again, I don't buy a dictionary planning to take it with me everywhere I go. I buy a dictionary for at home, for my own resource and reference. I wouldn't necessarily buy a big expensive book like the Fables book and expect to tote it around, because for one thing, I have a rule about books on the table, rule books and game stuff specifically. Nobody's allowed it, and I don't violate my own rule if I don't have to. I've already written down notes, crib notes on, what they'll encounter and how many they're likely. I've got all that stuff already in advance. I don't need to pull out a book and look through it. So I don't see those large, lovely books as something you're bound to carry around. It should be at home on the coffee table or on your reference desk or on your desk. And I don't believe there's within reasonable bounds. I don't think you can have too much art. What would I personally be comfortable with? 65-35, 60-40 copy to art wouldn't bother me in the least, because you don't have to have art just on its own white page. You can back print stuff, and there's so many things you can do with the layout. I understand that artwork sells books, and that most buyers will just put these books on the shelf or coffee table to be leafed through occasionally for ideas. Do you think there's enough demand in the marketplace to sustain print runs of hard copy resource books that do not use highly decorative, oddly colored display fonts for lesser headings, that focus on high contrast and preferably black and white images on pages that are mostly body text, but don't include cutesy background images that try to simulate parchment or vellum and are printed on matte white or natural colored paper stock? Well, you reveal yourself just a little bit as being kind of a purist, and that's okay. Do I think there's a market for it? No. If you're going to buy the book, the color book is what's going to sell you, and that's what you're going to buy. Now, if you devote your life to this book and this game system, you might look at something like such as you just described here, or you might be inclined to do it on your own. Or you might be inclined to get a PDF as well as the hard book and then just manipulate the PDF all you want to do on your own. I don't think the gaming public is going to go from 72-inch 5G TVs back to an old Sylvania 17-inch black and white. 17-inch black and white Sylvania will still give you they'll give you the news, but you won't have any of the impact that you'll get with that 5G LED, whatever the hell they are. I don't think you'll sell them, because except for textbooks, eye candy is a big selling tool. And even in textbooks, I know when I was teaching, some textbooks had way too much eye candy in them. That was a distraction. But in a game book like the Fables book, I wouldn't even hazard a guess at what the actual percentage is. But I certainly don't feel if you can stay around that 60-40, 65-35, I think that works real well. I think it's a good value, because there is value to the art in its ability to stimulate your imagination, or simply fill in a blank. This is what such and such looks like. This is what these words are trying to describe. I think that's perfectly valid. How do I feel about firearms in fantasy? I don't like them. If you use them, how do you implement them? I don't like them. Daddy Rolled a One, another YouTuber, recently did a video on the history of firearms in early D&D, and it's interesting that it was in chainmail, but dropped later. Yes, for a reason. Then after Gygax left TSR, he did make some rules for firearms even though he seemed to have quite a strong dislike for him in fantasy. Now, Daddy Rolled a 1 apparently replied to this. I found the Firearms rules from Gary was in Gary Gygax's World Builder, a later era book published by Troll Lord Games. Right, it was after. And he was... The World Builder books, just like his names book. I have one of the names books for generating names. There was a period of time, and it still applies to a lot of people. It's really, really hard to come up with novel names, unusual names, something that is unique. And so there's no question of which Portland, Maine or Oregon. Okay, that type of thing. It's very difficult, and so he came out with a name generator. And suggestions of how the names would be built. The names would literally be constructed based on the culture of the race of the speaker. The world builders were a generalized blueprint for how you go around building a world in a fantasy setting. Gary, by the time he was starting to write some of this, had broken away from the mold of first edition. He was into the other kinds of role-playing stuff that he was doing. When he was with Troll Lords, he wasn't doing D&D at all. He was doing Castle Zygag and Dangers, Ventures, and it wasn't dangerous. Anyway, the other systems. He didn't like them in OD&D, original D&D. He didn't like them because they had too great an impact on a situation based on their size. Even with limited bullets, you still, if you know how to use it, you still have. Okay, I can kill 5 more really big things with a single shot to the head. Now, if you just point the tube and pull the trigger and you don't know how many more bullets are in it, that's a different story. It could be an artifact found. I don't like them at all, really. I don't. I've never put Firearms into a game that I designed, a scenario that I've designed, or in a campaign that I've run, ever. Oddly enough, not too many people that have chosen to play in the Wheel of Blame have introduced them into the format of the game. A couple that have, it was terribly, terribly bad results. So you don't need it. Having said that, this is a ticklish situation. Ticklish area. Gunpowder, in my opinion, gunpowder and spells don't mix. In my opinion. Not the explosive, concussive gunpowder that we're talking about here. An artifact. And how many charges does it have? That is, bullets. Possibly. Especially if there's, let's say there's a clip of 7 in a rifle, and it takes you 3 of them to figure out how to work it and not kill yourself with it. They've only got 4 charges left. And I'm not going to give any culture in my world setting the capability to reload or to craft new cartridges or manufacture gunpowder. No. I don't think. My God, you got dragons and fireballs. What the hell do you need gunpowder for? You could throw lightning off the tip of your finger. Why do you need a Glock? You could fry the whole room with one zzz. And you wouldn't have to go bang, 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 bang. Oh, I don't like them. Now, there was some things in chainmail that when chainmail was written, you have to. It predates D&D. It was written to introduce. It was nascent D&D. They put in other stuff, looking down the timeline, and tried it out, and that was chainmail. Wasn't D&D. No, and this the other individual says, Daddy rolled a one. No, I don't believe troll rollers. The brothers had way too much respect for Gary to stick something in something that he, just stick something they liked in there. They wouldn't have ever done that to him. Their respect for him was very profound. Gary was trying out different things. I don't care for the way his games were going, his designs, because they were relying on skills and abilities and innate this, and I didn't care for it. That's all. If other people were playing it and having a good time, that's okay. I don't care for Pathfinder, but if you're playing it and having a good time, that's great. I certainly don't. There's several editions of D&D that I didn't approve of and still don't. But it's not for me to approve. If you're having fun, that's all that matters. And then a comment on the game that I'm currently become the time sink that I've currently become involved with, Age of Wonders 4. If you like your fantasy in a turn-based strategy game with tons of magic and dozens of types of characters, I can't recommend it highly enough. And then just go to the graphics. Oh my God, the graphics are astounding. I don't play first-person shooters. Never had. The only first-person shooter I ever had was I played Doom for a while years ago, and because I'd gotten a hack program that changed all the certain level bad guys into Barney, and so I'd put in the unlimited ammo cheat and change them all to Barney, and then I just shoot Barney for 20 minutes after I came home from work some days. So and I play poker online, and there's other games I have, wasted hours of time, but this is my new favorite. The concept's interesting. The ruler projects his power through the heroes, and if you run a stack with no heroes in it, don't expect any help. You're going to fight a strict melee battle, no spells involved or anything like that. The bigger there are scenarios in there where you're building your wizard's tower, and the bigger and taller your wizard tower is, the greater you can project your power. A little phallic there, but it's done tastefully. Great game. I really enjoy the game. May Metamorphosis be with you. I'm not sure what Metamorphosis. Anyway, I found something of tawdry interest on the title page of James Ward's Greyhawk Adventures, 1988, that I wanted to bat around with you. A list of trademarks owned by TSR includes products of your imagination. That's quotations. All this trademark may have been after your time. I was wondering if you knew anything about it, such as what product line it protected, and how it came about. As a TM, it's rather broad-sounding and a bit like TMing a common phrase. There was a time when somebody at TSR wanted to get into educational products, and this may be, because it was certainly after I left, but they had other venues that they were looking at, and this may have been either something like that or something for doing abstract games. That weren't war games or board games or whatever, but abstract games. Nine Man Morris, things that terrible lattice laticulorum or thing that they did. I'm guessing. Well, a little better than a guess, but that's what if I had to guess, that's what I'd guess. Metamorphosis Alpha. The original intention is apparently inspired by Nonstop, Starship in the U.S., by Brian Aldiss. Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask Jim where it came from, what inspired him to do it. What I remember from those pre-formative days was Jim was an avid fantasy player, but he was also a big science fiction fan. And so it was natural for him to apply that interest into a game that was science fiction. Excuse me. I had to oil the tonsils. Possibly also Orphans of the Sky by Heinlein. Well, it's like asking Jim, did he have an appendix N? What did you read, Jim, before you did this? Where do any of us get our ideas? Unless we're one of the few that can create stuff out of thin air, great new ideas. We all synthesize everything we've seen, absorbed, or heard up to that point, and then regurgitate it in a new form. And that's not to take anything away from Jim. Are you familiar with those books when you were introduced to Metamorphosis Alpha? Probably this Orphans of the Sky, because I was a Heinlein fan. And when I was introduced to Metamorphosis Alpha, oh my God, that was hours of frustration that we look back upon and with great fondness and fun. We were informed that we were needed for a playtest session of a new design, and this is, I believe this may have been one of the rare afternoon sessions that we actually did on hours, on working, on the clock, so to speak. Or it may have been one of the 7 in the evening ones where we came back to the offices. But anyway, we were told that we were basically Cro-Magnon men. We were at a very primitive civilization, no technology, and we, the adventurers, were the brave members who had found a way out of their world and were out exploring. And of course, the premise being that, colony, and it fell into ruin and civilization devolved, and they all, another dark age, yeah. And we didn't know crap. One of the guys walked around for 2 sessions, not able to see out of one eye, because he put the silver tube up to his eye and accidentally hit the button and turned on the flashlight. We didn't figure out a staircase until the 3rd night. Those neatly piled stacks of wood, and then there were buttons on the wall, and we were too cautious to just walk up the neatly stacked wood and push buttons, but we had to figure it out. So I don't know if it'd been any good if I read any of that stuff anyway, because it doesn't. When I'm playing in a fantasy game, like when I used to do charity games down in Texas or that, it didn't occur to me that, Doug read so-and-so, and that's where he got that idea. I was too much into the moment to figure out where it came from. Sorry, I had to assume you had experience with the game, but I noticed that Ward has some articles on MA published in the Dragon. So I have knowledge of the game. I helped play test it, and it was great fun. It was a big switch from the fantasy we were playing at the time. Big switch over. And we found at TSR that was a good thing, switching over. I found the same thing when I was running games in Carbondale. We D&D for several weeks, and then we're going to do some Boot Hill next Saturday, and we kind of recharge our batteries doing something different. What relationship did I have with Jim Ward back in the day? And do I know how Ward was able to retain the rights to MA? Yes, I do know. What relationship? Well, I first met Jim. He was still teaching school, and so he was just flitting in and out in the afternoons, and which I wasn't there often in afternoons at first, because I was usually home. I came in, worked in the morning, and left about 1:30 or 2 to get home in time for my wife to take our one car to her job at the hospital. So, but when I did see him, hi, how you doing? Seemed like a nice fellow. He played in a few of the playtest sessions. He was a good player. We got along. He did Gods, Demigods, and Heroes, and he picked up the ball. He picked up one part of the ball that Kuntz dropped. I picked up the other part, and he was good about getting that part done. It was, delineating pantheons and assigning him hit points and skills and abilities and spell effects and stuff like that. I enjoyed working with him. We've stayed friends over the years. And when he got sick a long time ago, he got into some tremendous debt, and I was glad to help him get out from underneath that. I started up a bank fund and saved the warden, and we were able to get him out of a lot of really heavy-duty medical debt. Jim and I see each other at GaryCon every year, and we see each other at well, he doesn't come to GameHole anymore, I don't believe, but we see each other at GaryCon, and we both ride scooters, mobility scooters. Usually, it has in the past been the ones that the convention's gotten for us. I now have an inexpensive breakdown one of my own. Hey, forgot the lances, So we still joke around in that, and I still consider him a friend. Do I still have contact? Well, yeah, I could call him up. Well, not this. It's a little late when I'm doing this, but yeah, I still have contact. It's a Mug Puppy Games published MA 4th edition, so I wondered if you maintain. Yeah. Via Jim. No, I don't have to get a hold of Jim Ward through Jim Lumpler, but they're the reason that I have two listings on my phone. One's Jim W. and the other one's Wampler. Because, what's the odds? I have two other Jims, but they have other last names. I saw him at GaryCon. I'll probably see him. I don't know if he's coming. It all depends, I think, on how he's feeling that weekend, whether or not he's going to make it to GameHole. That's right around, it's around Halloween, sort of. One year it was Halloween weekend. Boy, was that fun. Everybody dressed up and all the kids. Snowed that weekend, and so all the kids came and trick-or-treated at the GameCon. Damn, that was fun. Next question. I'm very curious about the way combat should be handled with large numbers of characters or henchmen. If there are 6 players in a group and each player has, for example, 5 henchmen, that'd be a whopping 30 characters potentially going down into a dungeon. That'd be an impossibility. That's an army. If you're going to use the feudal basis that is common underpinning in D&D, you and five buddies each bringing 6 guys along, or 5 guys along with you, making your party total 6. That's a small army. You don't sneak in and out of dungeons with 30 people. I wouldn't allow it. Just not the way I wouldn't do it. Not on a regular basis. Now, having said that, if you were to get into a big combat of some sort, there's a couple of ways you can handle it. With my combat, especially in the first 3 rounds, it's not mano a mano. It's roll your dice. Did you hit somebody? And if you did, which somebody, randomly determined. And sometimes, yes, it happens that when there's 2 trolls, everybody ends up hitting the same one until it's almost chopped into splinters, and the other one goes unscathed for a round or 2. It's the way I like to run it. Works well for me. Boy, my lighting's washed out down here tonight, isn't it? Well, I hope Jim can clean this up. So number 1, I wouldn't have that. And yeah, I did. Back me companion called mass combat called the War Machine. We also put out a set of rules called Swords and Spells. Didn't sell worth a damn, and I'll bet it's been used even less. It's there. If you want to have a pure D&D mass battle, it's there. I used to be involved in a fantasy campaign that was miniatures oriented and based here in Cincinnati. I believe it's still going on now, 30-some years later. And they had a 3-ring notebook this thick with all the rules they'd come up with all over the years. And it was down to nitty-gritty single wizards casting spells. But it didn't go down to individual swordsmen or individual pikemen. Neither did Swords and Spells. Falmouth campaign is the name of the other one. It's been going on a long time. The guys at Relpartha were involved in it for decades. So the question becomes moot when I wouldn't allow that many. I have in the past had no problem with a party of 6 having 4 or 5 guys that they hired, NPCs, that they hired for the adventure, making the party 10 or 11 now. And I would handle 10 or 11 just like I'd handle 5 individually. Combat rounds just take a little longer. We didn't do large combats. Not the way this is being presented. If a party of 7 adventurers ran into a group of 12, roll the dice, 23 goblins. Generally speaking, 23, there's 7 adventures divided by, everybody's got 3, roughly. And there's some fractions left over. And you could handle it that it was you against the other 3. And depending upon how nitty-gritty you got, you could get down to rolling all those individual dice, or for initiative alone, or you could lump it, give the 3 against you a roll. They work as a roll, you work as a roll. You can go that way. There's ways to do it, but I don't see much reason for it. If you're going to be adventuring underground in a dungeon, it's assumed you're going to be either so big and powerful you're just going down on a seek and destroy mission, killing everything. More likely, you're trying to find something, so you don't want to clank, clank, clank around. It's not like you got 30 Huron warriors who can sneak through the forest with nary a sound. Huron warriors didn't carry metal any more than maybe their knife, which was in a leather sheath, which didn't clank. My poor head can't envision a circumstance that would require 6 people going down with 5 guys each, or 5 guys going. I just can't see that. I can see a group having some hirelings. The mule holder, the torchbearer, whatever. The meat sack up in front. Of course, that doesn't last very long. The rest of the hirelings see that and say, yeah, no, goodbye, and they leave. It sounds to me, with your comments about 30 characters, 40 characters being too small for you, that you need something like swords and spells. Now you're talking units. It's a different ball game. If you don't like those, there are no skirmish class rules. Skirmish class being not divisions and battalions, but maybe companies and squads. That's how I define it. And that's sort of what you see. Skirmish rules are very big in England. They have some excellent different rules for different periods that enable you to fight some great fun battles and not have to buy 800 figures to do it. I don't know of any skirmish rules that work for fantasy. There's a niche for you. Try it. So whatever floats your boat. My simple solution is don't have that many. Okay, greetings, Tim. At about 14 minutes in, you discussed dragons and how you would be reluctant to use them in most campaigns today. Fair enough. Do you have any dragon stories from the gameplay that stand out to you, either Carbondale or maybe with Gary and Lake Geneva? No, I never saw a dragon in Lake Geneva ever. Nothing we ever rode had them in it. Not while I was there. Nothing we ever tested had them in it. I don't use them today because if nothing else, the Hobbit movies, the Lord of the Rings, the Tolkien movies, should give you a sense of scale on how big a dragon actually is compared to a man. Now, I don't give a damn if the man's Jason Momoa and, right, he's still dwarfed next to a dragon. Even, it doesn't even have to be as big as Smaug when compared to, the hobbits. It doesn't have to be that big. It can just be the size of let's just take a blue whale, except it's got legs and a neck, but just that big. Tell me again how you're going to kill that with your 3-foot sword. I don't care, your 5-foot spear. That's why I wouldn't use them, because it'd be way too unbalanced. If I were to write something with a dragon, it would be a really old, enfeebled one, or it would be wounded and festering and near death, and it would have to be in some way vulnerable. Dragon story, yes. I have a dragon story from Carbondale. It involves a brand new DM, me, making the brand new DM mistake, again, of not thinking through what you were finding on the random treasure charts, what they actually could mean later on in the game. And the random treasure charts called for something that I put into the game a ring of polymorph. And it was very, very potent. It wasn't just look like it, it was be it. And it got found and fell into the hands of Crazy Neil. Crazy Neil was an astronomer. So he was kind of out there to begin with. And Crazy Neil loved changing in. He would change into a golden dragon. And being an inexperienced DM, I allowed it. Didn't have my full control skills yet. I allowed it. And even though every time he did it, he ruined his armor, because he burst out of his armor and ruined it all and had to go get new armor, find new armor, etc. He kept forgetting. He'd get so excited and he'd change into a dragon. The first time he did it, it was good because he just kicked ass on whatever it was that had confronted the group. Lost his armor. The second time, he was just having a good time and went dragon and ruined his armor and felt very bad about it. Then there was the time that we were fighting in a dungeon, and Neil got a little nod on, and so he announced that he was going to run back down the right corridor and go in the first door on the right. Okay, now the first door on the right was about a 10 by 12 room. And he ran in the room. I said, "What are you going to do?" He says, "I'm going to polymorph." And I said, "You're going to what?" Which was usually enough to make people go, "Wait a minute." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to polymorph." I said, "Okay." And then we fought out what the rest of the group was doing, and it transpired as it did. And afterwards, they, what happened to Neil? What happened to Neil? And I said, well, Neil ran down the corridor to the right and went into the first door on the right. And so they went down to see what had happened to Neil. And they opened the door, and they found out that Neil had invented dragon spam, because he polymorphed himself into a gold dragon in a 10 by 12 room. Now you work out the volume of a 10 by 12 room with an 8-foot ceiling. That was dragon spam. He grumbled about it, but he came back and played again next week. He just didn't. I never gave out a ring of polymorph either again. No, that was one of my rookie mistakes. Do I still do the online Wheel of Blame? Yes. Regularly? Well, not as regular as I'd like. The players from Okinawa are going to play again next month for the 6th time. I've done some others. I'd love to do one a week. I just don't get asked for it. I just took a gander at the comments posted on your video from last night. Yeah. So he suspects that somebody let a chat GTP clone loose on me. Yeah, it was kind of weird, wasn't it? I didn't know then what I know now, and that's about the little 3 buttons, and I can just erase dumbass shit like that. All right, now. Is it wrong for a DM to give the PCs an STD just to emphasize that they all survived a very nasty dungeon? Yes, that's wrong. Call me a prude. I don't care. Inflicting an STD implies that they had carnal relations with characters in the adventure. Now, if you like to get into that level of detail, that's fine. If you're saying everybody got it, you're implying you're giving a set of moral behavior willy-nilly to your players. An STD, no. Malaria? Something that recurs every now and again? Certainly. If that's what really, you don't think that they already know that they got out of there by the skin of their teeth? You can give them old wounds that ache every now and again. Doesn't necessarily take off hit points, but, oh man, that trick knee of yours and it reduces your speed by 20% or something like that because your trick knee that you got running for your life from the pack of, rabid 4 foot tall dogs. 4 foot tall meaning at the shoulder. You can give them a wound that is a limp and doesn't go against my normal, the ability to evade the fatal blow definition of hit points or hard to kill, how hard to kill. It's just a reminder that you'll never be as fast as you once were, or you'll never be as agile as you once were. If that's what you want to do, it sounds to me a little vindictive. But, again, I don't know the circumstances. On the topic of dealing with treasure creep, how does dungeon disease rate as a way of lightening the party's purses, forcing them to pay for elaborate cures? That's a good way to flush the money out of them. Give them all a lingering disease that they all picked up down there in that foul, moldy, that doesn't even have to be black mold the monster. It can just be black mold, the crap that grows in your walls when they get wet. Certainly that can be justified. It's certainly a way to eat up their money. Of course, the best way to eat up their money is have one of the party die, and so then they got to go get a resurrection. Yeah, that's one way. Actually, the easiest way to do it is if a group grows complacent, and they're just not getting off their duffs to go out onto the next adventure, having too much fun in town. Just let the presence of all that currency start inflation out of control, and the money will go away faster. And if you got any smart people in town, they're going to get angry because they're going to figure out how it started. And that's another way you can do it. There's inflation is actually the best one that you don't have to go, what, me? Because inflation is inflation. It's just what it is. Too much money in circulation. Am I going to GameHole? Yes. I also didn't go to GenCon. It's a shame because it used to be. It's as little as 7-8 years ago. It was a manageable con. If you go, what would you be thinking about doing there at GameHole? Well, I run 3 Wheels of Blame, or Wheel of Blames, however you want to say that, And I also run a session of Dirt Track Saturday Night, which is as the title implies, a racing game on a dirt track where you do a lot of sliding and bumping and banging. And I used to say you can't die, but actually, as a lark, we decided to use some charts that we don't normally use, and sure enough, let's see what happens, and they died. They had to roll a 6 on a 6-sider about 3 times to have that happen. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be hanging out. I'll be going to the there's a pre-con party for all the guests that I'll be going to. I'll be hanging out. I'll be in the dealer area. I'll be expounding wherever appropriate. I'll be dropping in on friends' booths and getting to talk to people I only get to see once or twice a year. That's what I'll be doing. In the past, I did Adventures League stuff. At GenCon, I generally roll dice with DCC people. GameHole Con doesn't seem to have much of either. Well, you didn't look. Because I know DCC's been there in the past. I know Jim Wampler goes and runs MCC, Mutant Crawl Classics. And if you haven't played that, you're missing out. Even I like that one. And I'm not a big fan of role playing anything except fantasy. It's a good con, good people, nice venue, good food trucks. For me, not maybe 45, 55 minutes farther than Lake Geneva from where I live, so it's not that big a deal. I highly recommend it. It's a good con. It's growing, but every year it gets bigger. It's very, very well run. They have a whole buttload of games and stuff that they get donated to the con every year, and they draw both attendee, or they draw DM's name throughout the thing, throughout the whole con, and post them up on a board. And if the years is, I was one year, and I got, you get your pick of any game that's out there that was donated. So it pays to be a DM because they give away a lot of stuff like that. There's painting seminars, there's painting contests, there's the live dungeon. That's not something I do, but I know lots of people that really love doing live dungeon. There's a lot going on there. It's a pretty good con, and I really recommend it. Okay, and then also we'll wrap up on this note. I made a comment about Coke, and someone agreed that Coke is God's way of saying you made too much money. Yeah, there was a time in the industry when there was an awful lot of Coke snorting going on. Of course, there was a lot going on everywhere else. I just, to be honest, I've tried a lot of things. No acid, no smack, but I kind of like psychedelics. But cocaine never really had anything more than a very momentary type effect. And I'm beginning to wonder now in later years if that's it's just something about the receptors in my system, because back before I had to have my mouth rebuilt, I had a lot of trouble. Novocaine, lidocaine, xylocaine, none of those worked like the dentist expected them to. Either worked not at all, or they were shooting up so much that my ear would go numb. But they had a little or no effect on me. And being an AINE, AINE, like all those others are, I wonder if that's maybe why. never saw the point in it, and I stayed a pothead. Let's see. I guess that's it. D20's close to being released. I got 2 new projects. Oh, you might have heard about, and if you haven't, go look for it, the Lost Modules of GaryCon. For the first and second GaryCon, I wrote adventures that have really never been played anywhere else, and we're gonna put them out. We being Don Samora and I and Wizard Tower Games, going to put out those 2. Going to put them out in their original form. I'm going to buff them and rewrite them and expand them into the new form. And there's going to be maps and the hardbound and all that kind of stuff. It appears that there's some interest in that. I've got a couple others. I showed one to Don today, actually. He was down here. We were doing some business, and he drove back to Michigan, and he got home and said, well, I've already decided we're going to do with this one. So I've got some irons in the fire that'll be coming out soon. I have no idea what happened to Curse of the Weaver Queen. It was funded years ago. And I have no idea what Old Guard Games is doing with it, or if it's ever going to come out. Who knows? That's all I got. If you're living anywhere in the United States, you're probably sweating your fanny off. So stay cool, stay hydrated. Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.